If you had asked me a year ago, I would have smiled and told you I had a good marriage. Not the fairy tale kind, no sweeping gestures or cinematic declarations of love. But something better. Something real. 15 years of steady mornings and chaotic dinners. Of holding each other through sickness, heartbreak, joy, exhaustion. Of building a life, brick by fragile brick, until we stood together in something resembling forever. I loved Jacob with the kind of quiet certainty that only comes from surviving life's thousand tiny wars together. When I pictured my future, it was always with him in it. Gray hair. Wrinkled smiles. Holding hands at sunset. Our love was stitched into every plan I made without even realizing it. Until the night I found the journal. It was a Saturday evening, one of those soft, golden nights that feel heavier with meaning even before anything happens. It was our 15th anniversary. 15 years. We weren't doing anything extravagant. Just a small dinner at home, candles, wine, the same playlist we danced to at our wedding. Simple. Familiar. Ours. While Jacob ran out to grab a last-minute bottle of wine, I decided to set up a surprise. The photo album from our honeymoon, the one we always joked about, full of bad haircuts, awkward selfies, sunburnt smiles. It was usually tucked away in the bottom drawer of his office. I pulled open the drawer, smiling to myself. But the photo album wasn't there. Instead, lying neatly on top of some old papers, was a small, worn leather journal I didn't recognize. At first, I wasn't going to touch it. I told myself it was private. That everyone is allowed secrets. But something made me pick it up anyway. Some sixth sense. Some tremor under the skin of my happiness that I hadn't wanted to name. The first pages were harmless enough. Random scribbles. Sketches of trees and buildings. And then, the entries. Dozens of them, written over years. At first, I didn't understand. The handwriting was hurried, emotional, almost desperate. And then the name started appearing. Emma. Page after page, Jacob poured out his heart to her, or rather, about her. Memories. Regrets. Wishes. Longing. Emma should have been my wife. Emma was the one that slipped through my fingers. I love my life, but sometimes it feels like wearing someone else's shoes. I stopped breathing. Emma. A woman I barely knew, someone he had mentioned once or twice, a high school thing he had laughed off long ago. A ghost I hadn't even realized was living between us all these years. Entry after entry made it clear. When Jacob married me, he wasn't choosing me because I was his one and only. He was choosing me because she had already said no. I was the safe choice. The second option. The compromise he had convinced himself was good enough. By the time Jacob walked back through the door, smiling, carrying the wine in one hand and flowers in the other, I had carefully placed the journal back where I found it. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I stood there, feeling the weight of 15 years crashing down on me all at once. Smiling like a woman in a play she didn't know she was performing. Pretending like I hadn't just watched my entire marriage crack quietly at the edges. Revealing, underneath the surface, a truth I might never be able to unsee. I wish I could say I confronted Jacob right away. I wish I could tell you I demanded answers, that I screamed, cried, threw the journal at his feet. But the truth is, I didn't. I couldn't. Not that night. Instead, I sat through our anniversary dinner like a woman underwater, smiling, nodding, answering his small talk with mechanical politeness. I listened to him toast to 15 beautiful years. To choosing each other, every single day. To forever. And all the while, I tasted the metallic tang of betrayal in every sip of wine. When he reached across the table and took my hand, my skin flinched without permission. He didn't notice. Or maybe he did and pretended not to, the way we sometimes pretend not to notice the beginning of the end, because acknowledging it makes it real. He kissed my knuckles, still grinning like a man who had everything he wanted. And maybe he did. Or maybe he had just convinced himself that almost was close enough. That night, after he fell asleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The weight of 15 years pressed down on my chest like a stone. I replayed everything. The proposal, how nervous he'd been, how I thought it was because he was scared of screwing up. Our first apartment, the fights about rent, the burnt dinners, the cheap wine on the floor because we hadn't bought furniture yet. The birth of our son, the way Jacob cried harder than I did the moment he held him. Were all of those moments real? Or had I been living someone else's plan B the entire time? I felt like a fool. I felt like I had been loved conditionally, loved with an invisible asterisk I had never seen until now. Loved because she wasn't available. Loved because I was there. Loved because life had to move on. I wanted to hate him. God, I wanted to. But love doesn't disappear in one night. It lingers, clings to your bones, your breath, your memories. It asks impossible questions. If he treated me well, does it matter? If he stayed faithful, built a family with me, tried to be happy, am I still allowed to feel betrayed? Can a life built on second best still be real? There were no easy answers. Only hurt. Only questions with no satisfying endings. Over the next few days, I drifted through life like a ghost in my own home. Making coffee. Packing school lunches. Folding laundry. Kissing Jacob goodbye every morning. Playing the part of the woman I had been. Even though, inside, I was someone else now. Someone fractured. Someone hollowed out by a truth too big to carry but too devastating to set down. The worst part? Jacob didn't even know I knew. He smiled at me the same way he always did. He slipped his arm around my waist when we cooked dinner together. He told me he loved me every night before we fell asleep. And every time, it felt like being stabbed with something small and invisible. Something only I could feel. Because how do you answer I love you when you know that, once upon a time, someone else had his heart first? And maybe still had the parts he never gave away? Secrets are heavy. They don't just sit quietly inside you. They grow. They press against your ribs. They claw at the edges of your sanity. Every day after I found the journal, I carried that weight. And every day, it got harder to pretend. The smallest things became unbearable. Jacob smiling across the breakfast table, talking about a trip he wanted to plan for our anniversary next year. Jacob brushing a stray hair from my face, looking at me with so much affection it physically hurt. Jacob laughing at some terrible joke I made, the sound I had loved for so long, and me wondering if he had ever laughed like that with her. I became a stranger to myself. Guarded. Distant. Afraid. I wondered if he noticed. If he chalked it up to work stress, or hormones, or the 1,000 invisible shifts that happen between people after enough time. Or maybe he noticed and chose to pretend too. Because that's what we were both doing now, pretending. The final straw was something small. It was always something small in the end. We were cleaning out the garage together, getting rid of old junk. Laughing about boxes we hadn't opened since our first move. Jacob pulled down a battered cardboard box from a high shelf and smiled. "I think this one's yours," he said, setting it down with a thud. But when I opened it, it wasn't mine. It was filled with old photos, ticket stubs, notes. Pieces of a life that had nothing to do with me. Photos of Jacob and her. Emma. Smiling, arms around each other, their youth and love burning off the paper even after all these years. He froze when he realized what I was holding. And for the first time in weeks, I saw something crack behind his eyes. Panic. Guilt. Recognition. I stood there, the box open between us, my hands trembling. 15 years, I said softly. 15 years, and you kept her here. Hidden. Stored away. Jacob opened his mouth. Closed it. No lies came out. Because there was nothing he could say now. Nothing that could unmake the truth we were both drowning in. Was I ever enough? I asked. It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't a scream. It was just heartbreak. Raw and desperate. He crossed the room slowly, reaching for me like he could fix it with a touch. "I love you," he said. And maybe he meant it. But love wasn't the question anymore. I stepped back before he could reach me. "Did you ever love me the way you loved her?" I whispered. Silence. And then, finally, Jacob lowered his head. "No," he said. It felt like all the air was sucked out of the room. I stood there, blinking, trying to process how 15 years could collapse in a single breath. "But you chose me," I said, voice shaking. "You married me." He nodded miserably. "You were safe," he whispered. "You were real. You were good for me." Safe. Good. Second best. A consolation prize wrapped in promises and Sunday morning pancakes. I didn't cry. Not then. I just nodded slowly, closing the box carefully like I was packing up a life that no longer belonged to me. "I deserve to be someone's first choice," I said. "Not a placeholder. Not a safety net. Not a memory's shadow." His eyes filled with tears. But I was already gone. Gone in the ways that mattered. Gone in the ways you can't come back from. That night, I slept in the guest room. Alone. Surrounded by the ghosts of a marriage I thought was real. And for the first time in 15 years, I dreamed of a future that didn't include Jacob. A future where I wasn't someone's second best. A future where I chose myself. The morning after our confrontation, the house was unnervingly quiet. Jacob left early, slipping away without waking me, or maybe he knew I wasn't really sleeping. I sat in the guest room, wrapped in a blanket that smelled faintly of detergent and dust, staring at the walls like they might tell me what to do next. 15 years. 15 years of birthdays, anniversaries, vacations, fights, forgiveness. Of life built hand in hand, step by careful step. Was it all a lie? No. That was the cruel part. It wasn't a lie. It was a half-truth. A life built on almosts. On good enoughs. And now, I had to decide if good enough was enough for me. Friends would tell me later that marriages survive worse. Cheating. Abuse. Betrayal. "At least he stayed," they'd say. As if loyalty without love was a prize, I would think bitterly. I didn't need a man who stayed because it was easier than being alone. I needed a man who chose me. Every day. Without regret. Without looking back at what could have been. And Jacob, for all his kindness, his loyalty, his decency, had never chosen me with his whole heart. I saw that now. For days, I moved through the house like a visitor. I cooked meals I didn't eat. I washed clothes I didn't fold. I answered work emails with mechanical precision. Jacob kept his distance, afraid, maybe, or ashamed. He left post-it notes on the counter. "I love you. I'm sorry. Let's fix this." Each one felt like a bandage slapped over a wound too deep to close. He didn't understand. This wasn't about forgiveness. It was about truth. And the truth was that I deserved more than being someone's second choice. Even if that meant tearing my own life apart to find it. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, I packed a suitcase. Not dramatically. Not angrily. Just quietly. I didn't take much. Some clothes. My favorite books. A small photo album, not of us, but of me. Memories of the girl I had been before marriage swallowed her whole. When Jacob came home, he found me by the door. He froze, keys dangling from his hand, panic flashing across his face. "Please," he said, his voice breaking. "Please don't go." I looked at him, really looked, for the first time in days. And I saw a man who loved me in his own broken, incomplete way. But not the way I needed. Not the way I deserved. "I love you," I said. Because it was still true. And because I had learned, maybe too late, that love is not the same thing as being chosen. I love you, I repeated, tears burning my throat. But I love myself more. His face crumpled. He reached for me. I stepped back. Not out of anger, but out of mercy. For both of us. Because staying would have killed us slowly. Better to end it clean, now, while there was still something tender left between us. I walked out the door, suitcase in hand, heart shattering with every step. The world outside looked the same. Cars passing, neighbors walking dogs, street lights flickering to life. But inside me, everything had changed. I had changed. And there was no going back. Freedom didn't feel like fireworks. It wasn't a triumphant exit with the wind in my hair and a soaring soundtrack behind me. It felt hollow at first. It felt like crying in my car in the parking lot 2 blocks from our house. The house that was no longer mine. It felt like shaking hands dialing a number for a hotel reservation at midnight, because I hadn't thought past walking out the door. It felt like grief. Real, gnawing grief. Not just for Jacob. Not just for the marriage. But for the woman I used to be. The woman who believed love was enough. I spent the first week in a hotel room with beige walls and stiff sheets. I barely slept. I cried too much. Or not at all. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the life we had built. Sunday mornings reading the newspaper together. Laughing about terrible movies. Dancing barefoot in the kitchen after too much wine. Was it all meaningless? No. That was the cruelest part. It had meant something. Maybe not everything I thought it did. Maybe not the fairy tale I wanted it to be. But it was real. And mourning it was necessary. Slowly, achingly, I started rebuilding. I found a small apartment on the quieter side of town. Nothing fancy. But it was mine. The first night there, I sat on the floor eating takeout straight from the box, surrounded by empty walls and unopened boxes, and realized I wasn't broken. I was starting over. There's a difference. I reconnected with friends I had neglected during the slow erosion of my marriage. I went back to yoga classes I hadn't attended in years, my body clumsy but grateful to move again. I started reading books that challenged me, inspired me. Not just comforted me. I stopped checking my phone for Jacob's messages. Stopped wondering if he missed me. If he regretted losing me. Because the truth was, regret or not, love or not, he had made his choice. And now, I was making mine. One morning, months later, I woke up before the alarm. The sun was spilling through the blinds in thin, golden ribbons. The city outside was just beginning to hum with life. And for the first time, I didn't feel the familiar weight on my chest. I didn't feel the sharp ache of loss. I didn't feel like half of something. I felt whole. Not perfect. Not healed completely. But whole. Because I had finally understood something I should have known all along. Being loved second was never a reflection of my worth. It was a reflection of his inability to see it. I sat by the window, a cup of coffee warming my hands, and watched the world wake up. Somewhere out there, Jacob was living his life. Maybe with regret. Maybe without. It didn't matter. Because I wasn't living for anyone else's choices anymore. I was living for me. For the woman who had been brave enough to say, I deserve more. For the woman who had walked away. Not because she stopped loving. But because she finally started loving herself more. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe love again. Maybe solitude. Maybe dreams I haven't even dared to imagine yet. But I know this. Next time, if love comes knocking at my door, it will be the kind that chooses me first. And if it doesn't, I am strong enough to choose myself every single time.